Thursday, I was over in our school teaching. Deacon John and I kind of co-teach, tag team, the 5th grade religion class over at Rosary. And we were talking in that class about Advent. And we were talking about the custom of the Advent wreath and how each week the church kind of focuses and reflects upon a different fruit of the Holy Spirit. But what I neglected to say at first was that the church focuses on a fruit of the Holy Spirit. And so when I asked them to guess what fruit we focus on during the first week, I got a lot of responses like banana and watermelon and apple. And so I corrected myself, of course, and said, no, we're talking about the fruits of the Holy Spirit here. Right? Each week during Advent, we focus on a different fruit of the Holy Spirit. Last week, in that first week of Advent, we focused on the fruit of hope. This week, we focus on the fruit of peace. Peace, in the teaching of the church throughout the centuries, is a really beautiful and important fruit that comes from the Spirit in our lives. And peace, the church says, is when everything in our life is properly ordered, when everything is in its right place, and when everything is directed towards what it's meant to be directed. St. Paul, in our second reading today, says, "This is my prayer, that your love may increase ever more and more in knowledge and every kind of perception, to discern what is of value, so that you may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ for the glory and praise of God." St. Paul prays for the Philippians and for us that we can discern what is of value, that our lives may always be ordered toward the most valuable thing. Not the most valuable thing as defined by the world, but the most valuable thing as recognized within the relationship with God that we were created for. I think it's a very interesting reflection on our lives. Certainly in my life, I know maybe interesting is the wrong word, but to think about if we want to discover what it is that we value in our life, what it is that has priority in our life. I think the best way to discover that for ourselves is by looking at the way we spend our time. Do we spend our time in prayer? Do we spend our time in spending quality time with family, with real conversations with friends? Do we spend our time focusing on the Lord? Or do we spend our time scrolling through social media, watching TV, watching sports, watching whatever else we watch on Netflix or Amazon or whatever streaming service we choose? How is it truly that we spend our time? And what is it in our life that needs to be restructured? What are the hills that need to be made low? What are the valleys that need to be filled? What are the paths in our life that need to be made straight so that we can go to the Lord, so that we can recognize what is truly of value, and that we can recognize what is truly not of value, and reorient our hearts, reorient our lives towards the good, towards God, towards real relationship, real love of God and neighbor. These are the things that our hearts are meant to be directed towards. And when those things get set aside, sometimes for good reason, I know in my life that's certainly the case, right? I like to tell myself that the reason I'm not praying is because I have all of these other important things to do and I have to give myself to all of you and take care of all of your spiritual needs. But if I'm not taking care of my own spiritual needs, then what's the point? If I'm not receiving from the Lord because I'm not spending time with the Lord, then there's nothing that I can give. If I'm not first directed to God, then nothing else I do can be properly directed towards its end. And so on this second week of Advent, I want to encourage you and perhaps even challenge you to spend some time, sit down, perhaps at the end of every day, spend 15 minutes writing down how you spent your time that day. How much time you spent in prayer. How much time you spent reading a book. How much time you spent engaging in real relationship with your family. How much time you spent watching TV. How much time you spent scrolling through social media, watching the news, whatever it might be. Write that down, and at the end of the week, look at it. Discern what it is that you value right now. And with the Lord, discern what it is that you ought to value. And how you can reorient your life and restructure your life to put the first things first and the second things second. So that properly ordering our lives first and foremost to the Lord and then to love of neighbor, we can find true peace when everything is in its proper place, when everything is directed where it's meant to be directed. And living in that true peace, we can grow more and more and more in love with the Lord and give ourselves over to Him in that relationship that He calls us and invites us into.